Good afternoon. Welcome to the second Distinguished Speaker Series event of the year. I'm Rachel Olden, a second-year MBA student and an executive fellow. I am especially excited to introduce our speaker today, Duke alumna and the president of the Women's National Basketball Association, Ms. Lisa Borders. There's more to the story. Since graduating from Duke University with a bachelor's in French, Lisa has delivered results across 3 sectors: public, private, and nonprofit. Lisa earned a master's in health administration from the University of Colorado and then took the field by storm. As president of the Grady Health Foundation, Lisa successfully guided Georgia's largest public hospital through a 5-year, $325 million campaign. By virtue of her upbringing in the segregated South and lessons from her grandfather, a civil rights pioneer who worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Lisa developed early a deep-seated passion for ensuring that all, especially traditionally disenfranchised communities, gain equal opportunity to prosper and thrive. Prior to joining the WNBA, Lisa was a social leader for one of America's most iconic companies, serving as the chair of the Coca-Cola Foundation and vice president of global community affairs at the Coca-Cola Company. Her commitment to her community in hometown Atlanta, Georgia, extended beyond the boardroom. From 2004 to 2010, Lisa served as the president of the City Council of Atlanta and the vice mayor of the city. Lisa is one of America's most powerful women in business, leading the longest-running women's professional sports league in the United States into its 22nd season. Since joining the league in 2016, Lisa has ushered in 2 stellar WNBA seasons, with the highest attendance in 5 years, double-digit growth in television viewership on ESPN networks, and record engagement with 13 million fans across social media. If you haven't already, you better check out the WNBA. Throughout her success, Lisa remains a dedicated champion for the communities and the causes she believes in. She is not only committed to the strategy and operations of the 12-team, 144-player league, but also to leveraging the WNBA as a platform to empower women and girls across the world. Lisa is living proof that when we learn from walking in the footsteps of great leaders, we then go on to blaze an even brighter path for those that walk in behind us. In 2015, Lisa joined the Duke Board of Trustees alongside NBA Commissioner and her friend, Adam Silver, also a Duke graduate. This past spring, Lisa partnered with Fuqua's Mentored Study program, which offered 3 classmates and me the opportunity to address a critical business challenge for the WNBA. During this experience, we saw Lisa in action, and it was nothing short of awe-inspiring. I think most of us in the room would agree with me that Lisa Borders' achievements embody the paired principle, impactful stewardship, which is an intrinsic part of our community here at Fuqua. From Auburn Avenue, where she grew up, to the basketball court, where she runs the game, Lisa is always bringing the thunder. And now she's bringing it back home to Duke to share with us today. Please join me in welcoming fellow Dukey and distinguished speaker, Ms. Lisa Borders.
Bonjour Lisa.
Bonjour, ça va? Ça va bien?
Ça va bien. Je suis très heureux vous êtes ici.
Oh, merci. Votre accent est très bien, monsieur.
Okay. So just checking out if that French stuff stuck with you there.
It still works.
Okay, excellent. So Lisa, we are so incredibly happy to have you here. And I'm looking at this picture in front of me. How cool is it to have your name on every ball?
You know, that's the coolest part of the job, having your name on the ball. But having your name on the ball, you know, that's a physical manifestation of what we do every day. We play the game. And I have said often, basketball is a metaphor for life. It really is. Sports is an international language. So having your name on a ball, something that's so iconic, super cool.
Yeah. Let me start by noting that one of the things that really defines you and your career is an incredible level of resilience. This is something that you started to develop at a very early age, where at age 12 you were asked to integrate a school. So that was not exactly a pleasant experience, and so I'd like you to say a little bit about how that shaped the person you are today, as well as what your mother would tell you when you would come home and complain.
Sure, sure. Well, let me just thank you for inviting me and including me in the WNBA in this series. We really appreciate that. And when I think about what shaped me as a leader and as a woman of color, it all goes back to my family and the things that I experienced growing up. Like, all of the experiences shape us in many different ways. I didn't tell you this part, Dean. In 6th grade, I got a D in conduct for talking. I did all my work, but I was disruptive, I was talking, and today people pay me to talk. I'm just saying. But getting that D in conduct really scared my parents, and my father said, you know what, you're going to end up under the jail. My mother said, you need to be in an environment where you will be challenged. So I was put into what we called then a private school, today an independent school. But that was 1969, which was a difficult time for Atlanta and a difficult time for the South and frankly for the country. And integrating a school in the South was nothing short of difficult. I was called a racial slur from 7th grade to 12th grade. And what I recognized was I had an opportunity to learn, but it was incredibly painful. When you're 12 years old, you have no perspective on life and on the world. And so all you want to do is fit in. And that doesn't stop at 12, by the way, Dean. We still do that, all of us as humans. We all want to fit in. We want to be included. And I can remember telling my mother, Richard, I would think I was in 10th grade, I don't want to go to the school anymore. There's no interracial dating. There's nobody here for me to date. And she said, you're confused. You're not there to date. You've got your whole life to date. Are there any available men here? I'm still working on that. You're okay. Give me your number. I'll take your number. But her point was you needed to stay focused on the issue at hand, which was getting my diploma. My family believed that education leveled the playing field, that if you had an education, once it was in your head, that was a weapon, that was a tool that you would use to navigate life. And so she was intent, as was my father, that I would stay at that school regardless if there was no one there for me to date, because I needed to get my diploma. And I did just that. What I learned through the course of that experience was that diamonds are made under pressure. Did y'all hear me? Diamonds are made under pressure. So the notion of having to navigate that adversity really created the person that I am today. It toughened me up, for sure. So at 12 years old, I had to navigate a circumstance that I'd never navigated before. I went to my mother, in a sense, asking for help. She was like, not only no, it was hell no. You're going to stay right where you are, and you're going to figure this out, and you're going to excel. That was tough love, or what she described as tough love. But today, when I see that same type of experience, I hearken back to being 12 and recognize that I can come through that, whatever it is. Short story. Fast forward with me to 2004, I was running for office in the city of Atlanta. People called me names, but it wasn't a racial slur, it was Republican. In Atlanta, if you know the city at all, my home city, Atlanta is a blue island in a red sea they call Georgia. And so for someone to call you a Republican, if you are African American, is the kiss of death. And I remember saying, you're going to call me a Republican and you think that's going to hurt me? That's all you got? Let's go. I've seen this movie. I know I can come through on the other side. I ran in 2004, never having run for office before. Ran and won, ran again and won again. People calling me names, so what? They're not paying your mortgage. They're not fixing your soup. They're not driving your car. Why do I care what you think? It just doesn't matter.
So one of the things that you've said is that people always underestimate me, and you like it.
Yeah.
Why do you like that people underestimate you?
Well, I like it because I use it as motivation. You know, when I calibrate their expectations, it gives me something to reach for. The minute someone tells me no, you're in trouble. As soon as you say you can't do that, I'm going to break my behind trying to get it done, whatever it is. In the case of school at 12 years old, people told me I shouldn't be at that school, that I didn't have the mental ability or capacity to compete. And so my job, in my mind, was to demonstrate that I could compete, that regardless of the color of my skin or the height of my body or the shape of the nose on my face, that my brain worked in the same way that theirs did. Frankly, it worked better in some cases. So I use it as motivation. I don't ask for people to underestimate me. It just keeps happening. So I just have to keep proving myself.
So you have a remarkable capacity to take a negative situation and turn it into something positive. Mm. Is that something that you're born with, or is that a skill one can learn? Because the reality is we all get knocked back in life again and again. So how do you turn that into something positive?
I actually think it's a combination. I'm a number one child. I'm the oldest of four, and I was always taught to take care of my siblings, and so you had a certain level of responsibility. But when I think about who and how I have lived my life, this notion of you always need to get back up because tomorrow is another day was something that was expected in our family. We've always been African American. We grew up on a street called Auburn Avenue in the heart of the city, but it was a segregated street. We didn't think we were going to be there always, but that's certainly where we learned the values in our family. And so this notion of being resilient, that tomorrow is a better day, and having faith in one's ability, that if you worked hard, you would achieve, and that ultimately you would be rewarded. But you must be faithful and not fearful. Oftentimes people think things that they don't understand and that they are afraid of, and they push back on them. They don't attempt to understand. We were taught that fear stood for false evidence appearing real. So we were taught to eat fear at a very early age and recognize that you had the power. The power was not beyond you, it was within you. So if you remember that and repeat that on a regular basis, Dean, you start to believe it.
Yeah. So putting together two things that you've said is, one, you mentioned that you're a woman of color, and so you are.
Yeah.
And that there are things that people fear. And one of the things that people fear a lot today are conversations about race, conversations about gender.
Right.
And as a woman of color, you're probably asked to speak about issues of race and issues of gender repeatedly.
Sure.
The question I have for you is, how do we get everybody into those conversations? How do we overcome that fear so that we can have those conversations that we so badly need?
So the first thing I tell folks all the time is when you're trying to talk about issues or topics that are highly emotional, you have to diffuse the situation and give people a safe space to have a conversation. Typically, now we talked about that I was called a racial slur when I was 12. Your first reaction typically when someone does something to you that is hurtful or that is uncomfortable is to fight back. But I recognized probably when I was about 40 that you don't put out fire with fire, you put out fire with water. So when people are calling you a name or people are saying something that's offensive, it's less about you, it's more about them and where they are. And typically they are afraid to have whatever conversation or enter whatever decision that you are trying to make. So giving them the space and the latitude to ask the questions they need to ask, or express their concern, or frankly to express their fear, goes a long way to bringing people into a conversation. When I hear someone call me a name or have a perception about me, I often ask them why. Why do you think I'm fill in the blank? And what I often find, if you give them enough time, they realize it's just that, a perception. They don't know me at all, or they don't know you at all, that they bring some bias to the table. We all have bias, explicit and implicit. But if you don't judge it and just evaluate it, it becomes a lot less emotional and a lot less acrimonious. It takes a lot of discipline, though, to stop and use both of your ears to listen twice as much as you talk, to be able to allow that person the space they need to get comfortable. I find that I get asked these questions often. I told some students earlier today, I'll be 60 years old next week. Do I look 60? You gotta be 60. You ain't gotta look 60. You don't gotta act 60. So at the end of the day, even though I'm 60 and most people would say you're set in your ways, you're 6 decades old, I try not to do that. I try not to judge. I try not to bring my preconceived notions to the table. And when I do, I try and check them when I realize I'm doing it. And if I forget, my son, who's 35, reminds me, Mom, that's a racist statement. You hate it when the kids come back at you with what you've taught them. So I think people need space. They need a safe space. They need to understand that you're not going to judge them, that you're not going to hit back, that you're going to listen and try and understand where they're coming from. You got to meet people where they are. I practiced this a lot when I was in public office for 7 years, and it really works if you listen.
Yeah. So to stay on this theme a little bit, there's no question that we are in challenging times, that the kind of the racial conflicts, the gender conflicts, that this is coming out in a significant way, that these are just enormous issues that need to be dealt with. And you made a very interesting comment to me earlier, which was all the progress that we made over a period of many years, we kind of took that and put it on a shelf. So what do we do to get back off the shelf and into action?
You know, the climate in which we find ourselves is pulling all of us back into what I would call the center of the arena of life. In sports, we each have a huddle that we go to or a bench that we go to. We create a plan for the game. Our coach draws up the plays. You go to the center of the arena and you begin the game. The game starts. It perhaps goes as you plan, and you keep playing. If it doesn't go as planned, you call timeout, you go back to your bench, you make a new plan, and you come back out to the field of play. Rather than call a timeout, if I can bring that metaphor to the political environment and the social and cultural environment where we find ourselves, we just continue to play wildly, without the referees, without any regard for what's going on if a player is hurt, meaning Charlottesville happens and people get hurt. We just become numb and we keep playing. Civil rights was a time just such as this. It was actually more violent. People were being hung, people were being shot, people were being discriminated against. It was much more overt. So I would tell you that what's going on today is no different from what was going on then. It has taken on a different dimension and perhaps been turned up just a bit, but we are seeing some of the same vestiges of the bad behavior and bad decisions that we saw decades ago. When I think about how we can make it better, we passed laws in the 1960s that said you may not fill in the blank, discriminate against people on the basis of their race or their gender. You really can't legislate behavior. You can't. If people really don't understand what's fundamentally wrong with their behavior and they don't buy into it, it's not a sustainable answer. So we wrote a law, we put it in a book, it's called the Library of Congress, we put it on the shelf, and then we've all been relatively inattentive for the last 50 years. That's in fact 2 generations. A generation is 25 and a half years. Let me take another step back. If you didn't clean the gutters on your house for 5 years, they wouldn't control the rainwater. They might even fall off your house. So what makes you think we could pass a law, not pay attention for 50 years, and not expect our society to devolve into chaos? It makes perfect sense where we are. Those of us who voted, some people didn't, in this last election, should have nothing to say. If you didn't vote, this is what you get. And if you did vote and didn't do everything you could to make sure we are living in a civil environment, and I'm not talking about a particular candidate now, I'm talking about participating in the process of civic engagement, now is the time for you to say, I voted, but that was not enough. I too must be engaged. I cannot leave this to someone else. Each and every one of us has not just the opportunity, but the obligation to participate and be fully engaged in this experiment we call democracy. It takes work every single day, not just to create it, but to cultivate it and curate it on an ongoing basis so that it lives and it breathes and it grows and it prospers.
So I think you have a sense of pride around the work that the players in the WNBA are doing in terms of their social activism.
Sure.
Can you compare and contrast what's happened there versus the pickle that the NFL finds itself in?
Sure. So I don't want to condemn the NFL or MLS or try to give them any advice, because I don't want them giving me any advice. Just saying. But at the end of the day, I would look to our players. Our players are, as Rachel told you, 12 teams, 144 of the most elite athletes in the world. Not female athletes, but athletes. But that's what they do. That's not who they are. They are people just like you and me who live in communities all across the country. 17% of them come from the international markets. They have a very deep sense of conscience about what's going on in the world around them. Their moral compass is very strong. So last year, before Colin Kaepernick took a knee, before LeBron and CP3 and Carmelo and those guys were at the ESPYs, our women were taking a stand about social justice in this country. When they started protesting, and the way they protested was to wear their shirts either on the wrong side or to wear a different shirt than what they were supposed to be wearing on the court, or what we call regulated apparel, they were fined. And we received a lot of backlash about fining the players. And folks have said to me that have known me for a very long time, how could you fine the players? You were grown up in Atlanta, that's the cradle of the civil rights movement. So here's the answer. When you do something that is inappropriate with your uniform in the NBA or the WNBA or our G League, our Gatorade League, you are automatically fined. I don't have to do anything. If you wear the wrong socks or the wrong, you don't tuck your shirt in, you're going to be fined. What we realized after 2 weeks of the world going crazy around us is that that rule that we have about wearing the appropriate clothes, or in the case of the anthem, standing for the anthem, all of those rules, frankly, were written to discuss decorum. It did not envision the social and cultural milieu that we would find ourselves in today. What I saw after the players protested, one team, then 2 teams, then 3 teams, I realized a couple of things. Number one, no team in the history of the world had ever protested anything. No sports team. When you think back to Tommie Smith in 1966 at the Olympics, athletes have protested before in individual sports, but no team sport had ever protested. So there was no rule book, there was no playbook, there was no way for us to say, what did so-and-so do? How can we learn from that group? We were on our own. What I realized is we had written up a plan, we had gone out to play, something unique had happened. We needed to call timeout, go back to our huddles, and write up a new plan. That timeout was when I said to Adam and my colleagues at the league, we're going to rescind the fines. This is something that I think is important to do. The athletes have a platform, they have a voice. I think we should support them. And to Adam's great credit, he said, how can I help you? We spent that particular day getting in a place where we could write a statement, where we could notify everyone, and we rescinded the fines. One of my colleagues said to me, you know, this is really unique. We are going to make breaking news, number one, because we fine the players, number two, because we are rescinding the fines, in effect admitting that what we did wasn't right. And I said, okay, what's your point? And the question was, are you willing to take that bullet, not only for the WNBA, but for all sports leagues? Are you willing to be the commissioner, the president, the leader who reversed course? And I said, and the alternative is to continue to do the stupid thing or the wrong thing? Like that's the alternative and that's what we should do? I'll take that bullet. I'll take it for every sport. And so we reversed the fines. And yes, we made breaking news on ESPN. It was literally like the shot that went around the world. What I think we did was rebuild some trust equity with our players, and we were able to take a leadership position in all that's going on in the world, back to how can we all help? How can we take the book off the shelf? How can we re-engage? We came back together because we were definitely on opposite sides of the field, the league on one side, the players and the players' union on the other. We were able to come back to the center and work together, which is where we are today.
So that's very interesting that you were able to bring people together. Given the way that you developed as a leader over time, where because of a number of events where you had to be really tough, really strong, I think that you admit this, that what that meant was you wanted to do everything yourself. And another way of saying it is you're a control freak.
Did he just go there with me? Like, really?
So how did you learn to let go? How did you learn to step back and let other people develop and shine and bring out their best?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's absolutely true. Growing up as number one child, I was the leader at home, and my parents invested a lot of trust in me to ensure that I would take care of my siblings and take care of the house when they were not there. So early on, I thought it was my responsibility and my responsibility alone to make sure that everything went well. And I tried to carry that over into every facet of my life. And by the age of 40, what I realized was there was a manager who wrote me up for that like 10 years in a row. I was a little slow at learning. And I recognized that what he was trying to tell me is that it wasn't necessary to do everything yourself. That part of getting to develop people and really achieving the goal is ensuring that everybody got their fingerprints on whatever you were trying to do. The other part, frankly, Dean, was I was just dang exhausted trying to do everything myself. If someone did something and I didn't think it was adequate, I would like do it over. After a while, you're just like, Jesus Christ, can somebody help me? But what you really realize is that you're in your own way, right? And so now I realize developing people is one of my greatest strengths, and that if you will allow people to take their own personal audit of their strengths, their weaknesses, where they can improve, and you help them to develop, they will follow you almost anywhere. None of us has authority over anyone. We merely have influence. The only person we have authority over is ourselves. We are the CEO of me. That's it. You're not the CEO of anybody else. So you can merely influence others, and if you develop them, they will come along and work on whatever project and give you not only their best, not an A, but an A+. So now, my theory today, do what you do best and outsource the rest.
So you've never been afraid of any kind of challenge, and you went to the WNBA, a new challenge for you, having come out of the running the foundation at Coke. What has been the biggest leadership challenge or the biggest developmental challenge for you moving into that space? And then the second part of the question is, what's the biggest challenge for the WNBA that as the leader you're trying to get accomplished?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge moving into this space is recognizing that it's a business like any other. Sports is often looked at as a hobby. It's so much fun. Didn't the video look like they were having so much fun? They are having a hell of a lot of fun every night. But to make that fun on the court, there's a ton of work that goes on behind the scenes. We have the playing season, which runs from April to late September, early October. And then we used to have what we call the off season from October to April. Well, for the WNBA players, there is no off season. 80% of our players now are playing in the international markets. Our league is only 21 years old. We're the youngest professional league, even though we're the longest running women's professional league. So our players have two jobs. They have a domestic job with us from April to September, and then they have an international job from October until April. The same thing was true for the NBA when it started in 1946. We didn't see the salaries that we see today. We didn't see the opportunities for endorsements that we see today. We weren't even on tape delay in the NBA until the 1980s. Most people remember some players from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, but typically when I say, tell me a player in the 1960s, people can name like 4 or 5. They cannot name 10 or 20. But if I start in the 1980s with Magic and Bird, LA and Boston, point guard and shooting guard, people go, oh yeah, I know who Magic Johnson is. So the WNBA is perceived like every other sporting league. It's just a bunch of fun and it's easy. No, it's a business. And I think to answer the second part of the challenge or the question is to grow the business in a sustainable way, to learn from Big Brother, the NBA, but also to learn from MLS and MLB and NFL. There's some things that they do incredibly well and then perhaps some others not so much. But we have the benefit of being a young entrepreneurial league. We are fresh legs, if you will, is what we say in basketball when you need a new group of folks to come on the court and play. So we can learn from the older, more established leagues. But that's the case, is getting folks to recognize this is a real business and then pivoting and having it actually gain traction, be sustainable, and be institutionalized in the ecosystem we call sports.
What's more pressure, giving away money, which you were doing at Coca-Cola, or being in a position where you need to make money in the WNBA?
You know, giving away money is actually pretty hard. It's, if you do it the right way, if you want to find a way to make sure that it's impactful, it's pretty hard. You can't just walk out and give it away. Oh, you can out on the street, but that doesn't work very well. And the boss would have fired me probably. Raising money is surely harder because you must articulate the value proposition. When I think about the W at 21 years old, you think you know a lot at 21. You really know very little. If you take it out of the context of sports and think about people, and you think about being 21 years old, which many of you are just about that age, right? In your 20s, you think you know everything. Trust me, it's...
This group does.
This group knows everything. You really don't, and you don't have perspective on that until you're 40 or 50, when you can look back and say, I wish I had known. So the WNBA has opportunities today that the other leagues didn't have. Case in point, When the NBA was born in 1946, there was no social media. The internet is a ubiquitous platform. We are streaming our games on Twitter. The NBA couldn't do that in 1946 or 56 or 66 or 76. So today we have opportunities that will allow us to accelerate our growth. We need traction and then to accelerate the growth of the business.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience to ask questions so you can start thinking. So my last question is, apparently when you do interviews, you always ask this question, and I'm going to ask it of you, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, wow. Are you going to tell Adam? I am actually living my dream. For all the roles that I have had, and I've been blessed to have many, I've had opportunities to learn, as Rachelle told you, in all three sectors. This, by far and away, has been the most fulfilling role that I've ever had. So giving away money and supporting disenfranchised communities and classes of people, that was impactful. At Coca-Cola, they do amazing work. Give back 1% of the operating income of the company on an annual basis, between $100 and $150 million. What I realized is that Coca-Cola was more the bank. I really wanted to do the work. So we would fund the Red Cross, for example, to respond to a natural disaster. We didn't actually do the work. In the WNBA, I'm actually doing the work. I'm the #1 salesperson for the WNBA. So we have a group at the NBA and the NBA family called Global Partnerships. They help us make pitches to companies about supporting the W, but who do you think makes the pitch on behalf of the WNBA? That would be me. So I understand the value proposition of the property, of the women, and what's going on in the world, as well as what's going on with that particular company, and it's my job to connect all of those dots. So I am so incredibly happy where I am today. I do not think, though, it's my last stop on my journey. Next, we're doing TV and radio.
So it's not back to politics.
It's not back to politics. Been there, done that, got 2 T-shirts.
Yeah, okay. Okay, questions from the audience.
There's one right there.
Do we have a microphone? Yeah.
I can also just speak loud.
Go for it.
Hi. So I'm sure that the choice to use the platform that you did with giving back or rescinding the fines of the women on your teams taking a stance was not an easy choice to make. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that challenge of how you use the WNBA as a platform that empowers an ideal of equality, an ideal of fairness and community versus ostracizing groups that might be politicizing this issue, as I think we're seeing like all across different sports groups.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to not judging. We as human beings tend to judge everything. And there was a recognition that the athletes are people first. They are athletes as professionals, and that to stymie their voices was just not the right thing to do. We have this little thing called respect in the workplace at the NBA, and I say NBA meaning the entire family of all our properties, wherein we say that we value every voice, right? That a good idea can come from anywhere and you should value every voice. What the players were doing was exactly that, having a perspective on what was going on at that particular moment. It happened to be social injustice, right? There were several shootings that happened that actually precipitated the concern that the players had, and I can recall that the final straw, if you will, was a shooting in Louisiana. And one of our players that plays on the Minnesota Lynx team, Simone Augustus, they call her the Bayou Baller. She's a bad girl. She's a 2-time Olympian, I'm just saying, and a 4-time WNBA champion. It was in her hometown. And I think that struck so close to home for Simone that it really permeated her entire team. And when you play sports, those people become very close. You know, sports is an international language. There are only two, music and sports. You don't have to speak one word to enjoy a beautiful piece of music or enjoy a sporting event. But the people playing on the team who are actually entertaining you, who are these amazing athletes, they are bound by that team. So what was affecting Simone was affecting that entire team. That group of women made a call to the league initially and said, this is really upsetting us. Their coach called first, and then they called and said, we want to speak out on this. Judging them is very easy to do. Dismissing them is equally easy. What's really hard is listening and trying to understand their perspective. And I think it took us 2 weeks as an organization to really get our heads around the fact that these were people just like us. They were not inanimate objects. They are not disposable, even though we trade them from team to team, which is a whole nother notion that we can talk about at another time. They are people just like us, and they had perspectives that needed to be heard. That make sense? Yes. Yes.
There are some folks that say, hey, just treat me like everybody else. There are some folks that prefer for you to meet them where they are. You've led teams, both domestically and internationally, you know, certainly within the WNBA. I'd like to know how that's played for you, what's worked well for men and women, and how that's played for you for domestic and international audiences, lessons learned, things you can share.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So from a leadership perspective, I think there are 3 attributes to leadership: competence, confidence, and compassion. Competence is derived by academics first and by experiences second. I said at the top of this conversation that we are all shaped by the experiences that we go through. So what I found is developing competence in whatever area. In this case, it's sports, because that's where I am now. Previously, it was in philanthropy. Before that, it was in fundraising. So developing a strong sense of proficiency for whatever you're trying to do garners a whole lot of respect. When people understand that what you're trying to do, you really have done your homework and you are coming fully prepared to exploit whatever opportunity, it really sets people back a pace. Confidence is built over time, incrementally. It's like riding a bicycle. When you first start, your parents are holding the bicycle and you have on training wheels. Eventually, your parents stop holding and you keep riding. After that, you take the training wheels off and you learn to ride the bicycle. But that ability and confidence is built over time. The same thing is true about work and the experiences that you have when you're trying to deliver on a project, on a mission for an organization. So what I've found is people have, frankly, as the dean said, always underestimated me. I don't know if it was because I was a woman or because I was African American or because when I was younger, I looked even younger when I was, because I look good now, right? Just kidding. When I was 40, though, I looked 28. And so oftentimes I thought, well, it wasn't necessarily my race, it was because I looked 12, and they think I haven't done this before. What I found is all I needed to do was deliver results at the end of the day and not worry about what they were thinking. I didn't really care what they thought. I only thought about delivering the results that were expected and oftentimes, frankly, exceeding those expectations. So when Adam and I decided that I was going to take this job, because he invited me to do it over dinner here at Duke, Richard knows this story, he said to me, I want you to do one thing. I want you to help get attendance up in all the arenas around the country. And I said, okay. So that was his expectation, that we would increase attendance because it had been flat and declining for 5 years. So basically he's saying to me, turn the business around, right? But the key performance indicator that he was measuring was attendance. So I was singularly focused from his vantage point on attendance. But what I found is like there were 3 or 4 other things that had to be done before you could increase attendance. Whether it was looking at how many tickets were sold, or what price the tickets were being sold at, or what time the games were. There were many different drivers to people not being in those seats. That was a lot of activity that had to be done to affect the key performance indicator. Adam didn't give 2 you-know-whats about all that activity. All he cared about was what? The result of attendance. So last year, when I showed him this video, it was a different video, that one was good too. Attendance was up, remember it had been flat and declining for 5 years. Attendance was up 4.6%. Somebody say amen. But not only was attendance up, viewership was up 10%, and merchandise sales were up 18%. So just because Adam said, work on this one thing, do you think I just worked on that one thing? But he's the boss, and he said, work on this one thing. So at a minimum, that's the floor in my mind. I was trying to make sure that we got that done, but all the other stuff, the ancillary stuff that had to get done, that's beneficial and adds incremental value to the league, to the players, to the teams. I really wasn't worried that people looked at me and said, you're a woman or you're African American. What they said was, damn, that woman delivers. So I often let people say whatever they want to say. I don't care. At the end of the day, it's just about the results. Does it mean I'm not offended when people say to me, you're a woman, I don't think you should have this? Of course I am. I'm offended. I typically have a body of work that I can share that says I belong here or I should have this opportunity. And I invite others, when you are interviewing with someone, toot your own horn. If you don't, there's no music. I told you music was an international language, right? So meeting you where you are does embrace that you are different. And when you have the opportunity to deliver, it does in fact punctuate who you are, regardless of the attributes that you bring to the table. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for being here today. Being a woman of color, you mentioned, it's so inspiring to see how such a tremendous leader you are today, so confident after all the challenge that come along the way throughout your career. I was wondering, do you have any fear at all? If so, what is your biggest fear in life?
Oh, do I have any fear? Of course I have fear. I just ignore it most of the time. So may I tell you a story? Okay, so let me tell you, most people want to talk about all the times that they have been successful because your success really helps build your confidence, right? But let me tell you a story about failure. And I think I actually learned more from failing than all the things I've done successfully. So I was vice mayor for 7 years and president of the city council in Atlanta. I ran for mayor in 2009. It was my race to lose, and I lost. I raised $4 million. I think I knocked on 50,000 doors. I really did do 58 debates. 58 debates. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And on the night of election, I went to my hotel room, I take my shower, I'm thinking this is going to be great. And my campaign manager comes in and says, X amount % of the precincts are in, you are behind, it is mathematically impossible for you to win. I was not a happy camper. I gave my speech, my concession speech. 2 people ended up in the runoff. I gave my concession speech. I went home and took to my bed. I didn't wash my hair. I didn't brush my teeth. I didn't eat, nor did I take a bath for 3 days. But on the 3rd day, what I realized is that the election wasn't about me. If you really love the city, you realize the election was about the people and what the people wanted. And they didn't say no, they said hell no. I'm just telling you, that's what they said. What was interesting about that is that I thought my will was so strong that I could get it done regardless of what was going on around me. I got a call that night, not from a single Democrat. I told you people were calling me a Republican, and that was the kiss of death in Atlanta, the blue island in the Red Sea we call Georgia. The only other elected official who called me that night he was then the junior senator. Today, he's the senior senator from the state of Georgia. His name is Johnny Isakson, and he's a Republican. Johnny said to me, Lisa, why are you crying? Because you know, there was a lot of tears and snot. He said, why are you crying? And I said, because I lost. What are you talking about? And he said, well, I lost like 7 times before I won. You need to just get back out there, run again. I was like, I'm not feeling you. I'm not hearing any of that tonight, right? I don't want to hear it. I worked so hard. I deserve this. He's like, no, you don't. This isn't about you. This is about the city and about what the people of the city want. There are many different ways to serve. You do not have to be in elective office to serve. That was pretty eye-opening, that someone from the other party who was at the federal level picked up the phone and called me, my friend, Johnny Isakson, and said to me, there are many other ways to serve. So I got up and brushed my teeth and washed my hair and took a shower and decided that this was my opportunity to really demonstrate grace, that I still needed to serve the city. But what I realized probably a year later, because had I been elected mayor, I wouldn't have been available to raise money for the hospital. Had I not raised money for the hospital, I perhaps would not have been on the radar screen of the chairman of Coca-Cola to get the Coca-Cola job. If I hadn't have gotten the Coca-Cola job, I perhaps would not have been on the radar screen to be a trustee at Duke. If I hadn't been on the radar screen to be a trustee at Duke, I perhaps would not have met Adam Silver, who was in my trustee class. If I hadn't met Adam, I wouldn't be the president of the WNBA. So here's the learning. Failure's not fatal, it's feedback. I wasn't supposed to be the mayor. And the guy that's mayor now, I endorsed him. And he has said to me when things have gotten really tough over one issue or another, he had an Occupy incident like 5 years ago, why didn't you tell me it was so hard to be the mayor? I was like, damn, I tried to tell you in all 58 debates. You weren't listening. Then I get to the hospital and he's mayor of the city, and the hospital is a level 1 trauma center. That's a really big place that trains all the doctors in the state and in the southeastern part of the United States. Its budget was bigger than the city of Atlanta. Then I get the Coke job. I said, you mayor of Atlanta, I'm mayor of the world. All jokes aside, because he's served honorably, and I'm delighted I'm not the mayor of the city of Atlanta. I love my city. I serve her in every way that I possibly can, but I was not supposed to be the mayor. So I learned more about myself, back to the point about resilience, that there were opportunities for me to serve, that life would go on. 3 days passed, the world didn't stop turning. I did stink after 3 days, though. So I would tell you that failure is a place that I have been, and I have learned more about me by failing than from all the successes. When we are successful, we all tend to just do the Snoopy dance and be happy. But when we fail, at least for me, I tend to try to evaluate what happened. How can I make this better? And so that very public failure, when I give keynotes, I often say, everybody Google it. You can look it up, that I lost in 2009. Very, very painful, but very, very informative and instructive for me as a leader.
Hi, first of all, thanks so much. My question is about balance. So I often find myself trying to balance my more like activist side with my responsibility to where I work and wanting to keep my job. And earlier you spoke about civic engagement. So I'm wondering, now that you're a representative for this huge company, and as you said, you're the salesperson, the spokesperson, the everything, how do you navigate that fine line? And is there sort of a best practices or a checklist that you follow? How do you make sure that you do what you're supposed to?
A checklist. No. So first of all, I told you I'm almost 60. And what I realize, I don't do anything I don't want to do anymore. I'm just telling you, I don't do anything I don't want to do anymore. And it took me a long time to get to this place. But what I would tell you about balance, there is no such thing as balance. There's only rhythm. You should move in the moment. You should move in the moment. And it takes time to get comfortable with yourself about what that means for you. So typically we are thinking about work and personal, like professional and personal, and how we balance those two things. And I'm always like, no, when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm at home, I'm at home. I compartmentalize better than anybody I know because I have to. I have a lot of responsibility at work. I have equal responsibility at home. From a civic perspective, I work in a place that supports my values. And so I don't have to balance because Adam and I and those of us who work at the NBA, we are philosophically aligned. That has not always been the case for me. People ask why I've left certain opportunities. I have never run away from anything. I have always run toward what I thought would be a better fit for me. I've been opportunistic about jobs or roles or opportunities where I thought I could make a difference. So the fact that I'm at the NBA and the WNBA and with the G League is no accident. In retrospect, I can look at every single job and see that I learned something and was able to bring something from those experiences to this one. At 60, I guess I'm pretty fearless. There are things that worry me, but I just keep pushing them down and make one step every day. Just keep walking forward every single day. And I just don't let anybody turn me around. I've been through too much. I've seen too many people get crushed because they listen to the negative noise. I just don't do that. I don't entertain it. If you don't have something positive to say, I said this to one of my employees, you're not invited to the meeting anymore. I'm just saying. Like, you need to be positive. I'm not saying you can't be pragmatic, but if you present a challenge, then let's present how we're going to solve that challenge. Negative Nancy and negative Ned just don't work for me. But I'm old. Great. Thank you.
So before you finish things up here, I'd just like to say, we are so lucky that you wanted to be here and wanted to do this. Thank you so much.